This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Officials from the United Nations are expected in Burkina Faso as ECOWAS military delegation wraps up its visit. The UK is set to unveil a new sanctions law targeting Russian economic interests. And we'll look at preparations to mark the Chinese New Year in Africa. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, business optimism rises after Rwanda and Uganda decide to reopen key border crossing. And coming up in your sports news, Rafael Nadal digs deep to make history with the Australian Open title win against Daniil Medvedev. And we begin the program with the latest from Burkina Faso. United Nations officials are expected in the country on Monday. They will meet with military leaders and other political and civil figures. The ECOWAS Committee of Chiefs of Defense Staff met members of the country's ruling military junta on Saturday. They also had a brief meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Paul Damiba, who is leading the military junta. The junta reaffirmed its commitment to work with sub-regional and international organizations. Our correspondent Desiree Cannon has more from Ouagadougou.
A delegation from ECOWAS met the leader of the junta in Burkina Faso yesterday. This meeting comes after the West African bloc suspended the country over the region's latest coup. In a statement received, the junta reaffirmed its commitment to working with the sub-regional and international organizations. A ministerial-level ECOWAS is expected to arrive in Ouagadougou tomorrow to meet again with the new military regime. The second delegation will then report its findings to West African leaders, who will hold a meeting on the 3rd of February to assess the outcome of Burkina Faso's missions and to decide whether to impose sanctions, as was the case in Mali and Guinea. Desiree Cannon, CGTN, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso is now under the control of the country's military, but for many residents, their daily struggles have not changed yet. Many daily wage earners rely on mining to provide for their families, so much so that a coup or gunfire could not stop them from continuing with their work.
On Sunday, January 23rd, gunfire was ringing out from several military camps in Burkina Faso. The next day, the world would learn that a coup had taken place. But for miners near the Hisi neighborhood in Burkina Faso, not even the shots from the nearby La Mizana military camp stopped work. That's because missing a day of work for these artisanal miners means they might not be able to provide for their families.
I am here, I break rocks. It is very difficult to break. If I work from morning to night, I can earn, for example, 1,000 francs. With this money, I have to feed the children, pay for their school. It's really difficult. The work is hard and it's really pitiful. I've been here for 10 years and so far I can't get by. It's really pitiful.
The granite mined here is used to make buildings, paving stones, or roads. For their hard labor, workers here are paid between $1 to $2 a day.
Sometimes you see big injuries. Sometimes the rocks hurt people. Sometimes it hits the eyes. Sometimes the hammer comes out and hits people. There are a lot of accidents and the slope is also slippery. People get hurt a lot here.
Many Burkinabés may be focused on the capital Ouagadougou, waiting to see what steps the military junta and ECOWAS will take next. But for workers here, there's only one option: to keep digging for granite, as they have for the past 40 years. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, West African leaders working together under the regional bloc ECOWAS are under pressure to stop the wave of military takeovers recently seen in the region. There have been 3 coups over the last 19 months that toppled the governments of Mali, Guinea and lately Burkina Faso. CGTN's Dejiba Demosi reports.
It all started in Mali on the 18th of August 2020 when a group of soldiers toppled the elected government. Barely a year later, there was another military takeover, this time in Guinea. Again, a group of soldiers sacked the government of Alpha Condé and took control of the affairs of the country. And in the latest incident, the Burkina Faso military seized power on the 24th of January. The soldiers were led by 41-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba. Analysts now fear a worrying trend is taking shape in the West African sub-region.
With the spate of I would say frustration, the unemployment that has been generated over the years and the inability of the political class to stem conflicts in those countries where conflicts have been the order of the day. These have provided ready weapons for the military to use as a basis for providing an excuse for intervention in the political lives of their countries. And so it is dire for the African continent, especially West Africa.
Regional body ECOWAS has come under the spotlight over what action it is taking against the coup plotters to restore democracy in the affected countries. Its response so far has been to impose wide-ranging sanctions on the countries while demanding a swift return to democracy. But so far, it does not appear the strategy is working.
What the present situation in West Africa especially indicates is the failure of the kind of diplomacy that ECOWAS has brought to play. The issue of sanctions. If sanctions were working and were effective, then you will not have the same thing being replicated in other West African countries like we have just seen in Burkina Faso. Unless they want to keep on doing the same thing and hoping for a different result, which is not going to happen, ECOWAS has to be ingenious. ECOWAS has to look for other ways.
ECOWAS has found itself in a very difficult situation where, in most instances, it's the people themselves who are welcoming the coup d'etat. Like what we've seen in Burkina Faso, the people came out on the street and were jubilating, showing that they were not happy with the, now unseated government.
Sentiments against ECOWAS are already building up in the countries where coups have taken place. There have been protests against the sanctions, with citizens demanding their removal.
There are hard positions that will just have to be taken, otherwise we're going to have a total reversal of the gains, the democratic gains that have been made in the West African sub-region in the past 2 decades. So something much harder has to be done.
With a number of countries in the region like Nigeria battling their own security challenges, ECOWAS does not seem to have the appetite for the use of force to restore democracy in the coup-affected countries. And it appears the coup plotters know this. They're using it to their own advantage for now. Dejiba Demosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The UK is expected to unveil a new sanctions law to hit Russian economic targets. Britain and the United States continue to claim Russia is about to invade the Ukraine, as despite repeated statements by Ukraine's president, defense minister and the chief of national security, who say that an invasion is highly unlikely. US President Joe Biden says he will be sending a small number of US troops to Eastern Europe. Now, Monday will be Chinese New Year's Eve, and President Xi Jinping has wished all Chinese people a happy New Year.
我代表党中央和国务院向大家致以节日的
On behalf of the Communist Party of China Central Committee and the State Council, I would like to extend festive greetings to everyone. We wish people throughout the country of all ethnic groups, compatriots in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, and overseas Chinese a Happy New Year.
President Xi Jinping recalled China's achievements over the past year, including the Communist Party's centenary celebrations. He said China has ushered in a new journey of building a modern socialist country after it completed the eradication of extreme poverty and achieved its goal of building a moderately prosperous society. President Xi said China has made more progress in high-quality development. Looking to the year ahead, he He said the Communist Party will hold its 20th National Congress to establish a roadmap for the next 5 years. He said China is ready to host a streamlined, safe and a splendid Winter Olympics. Well, the Chinese Spring Festival, also known as the Chinese Lunar New Year, is a crucial part of the country's rich culture and traditions. Each year, it is represented by an animal, and according to the established system of using the Chinese zodiac signs, the year 2022 has been called the Year of the Tiger. But what exactly does this mean? CGTN's Calligraphy spoke with an expert from the Confucius Institute in Lagos to find out more.
Professor Chimdi Maduagu has spent the past 4 years heading the Confucius Institute at the University of Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. He has vast knowledge in Chinese culture and traditions and has contributed to transmitting same to many past and present students at the institution. Chimdi tells of how the mythical origin that predates the Chinese Revolutionary era came to be such a strong cultural influence.
The determination of the Chinese years is something legendary. There's a myth behind it. Animals were going to be chosen to mark the zodiac system. Of course, 12 lunar calendars, and the animals were going to be 12. Various myths and tales converged, there's multiple orality in these things, converged that it was going to be determined by how swift and fast the animals were. The first 12 to win the race will take places in the determination of the timing.
12 animals became the notable ones in determining the naming of the Chinese calendar.
The animals that made this race, in no particular order, were the pig, the rooster, the dog, the monkey, the sheep, the rabbit, the horse, the snake, the dragon, the tiger, the ox, and the rat. So as a reward for their turning up, the emperor named a year in a zodiac after each of these animals.
And this year has been labeled the Year of the Tiger. Chimdi explains what this means.
The Chinese tradition picks the animals to serve as a pattern for the human beings. So every year, human beings born in that year are supposed to either directly or indirectly influenced by the animal totem that controls the zodiac of the year. For example, those born in 2022 will take after the features of the tiger. They will be strong, they will be fierce, they will be determined, they will be quick, they will be witty, they will be resourceful.
Experts have said that most of the culture and traditions that are not harmful to the current civilized, economically developed and sophisticated Chinese society are still accepted to date. As such, the Chinese culture is not an impediment, but an enhancement to Chinese modernity, giving its color and uniqueness different from the Western culture or any other Oriental and Asian states. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
To South Africa now, where the majestic art of Chinese calligraphy is being taught in Cape Town as part of Chinese New Year celebrations. With their brushes in hand and an abundance of enthusiasm, Cape Townians are learning how to combine Chinese characters as an art form. CGTN's Travers Andrews has more details.
Chinese calligraphy is the writing of Chinese characters as an art form, and it's a pastime that is growing in popularity in Cape Town. In celebration of the Chinese New Year, the Wang Laoshi Mandarin Center put on a Chinese calligraphy lesson to give some Cape Townians a masterclass in the art form.
Chinese characters is a very traditional art, and they can help people to stabilize themselves, because when you do the calligraphy, you feel quite calm, and also during the pandemic time, is everything's uncertain. The uncertainty makes people anxious. And this kind of art can really help people.
With each brushstroke, participants gained more confidence as they learned about the basics of Chinese calligraphy and its meaning. The Mandarin Center gained more students like this even against the backdrop of the pandemic, as interest increases in learning the language.
And then how to use Chinese characters is very useful. So the reason why people more and more, I can see our center is growing. Even during the pandemic time, and people still, I can see our business is still increase. In the beginning, it might be decreased, but you can see they pick it up already.
For the very first lesson, some fared better than others, but many were showing a keen interest in bettering themselves.
So I like painting in general, but this is something very different, and of course I don't know what any of it means. So I think there'll be some more interest in that, in learning what it means, and maybe I could create something like that behind me at some point. That would be really nice.
I am very interested in Chinese culture. This is an opportunity to introduce myself and learn more about the Chinese culture. It is difficult, yes, you need a lot of practice. Yes, it's difficult because it's my first time that I'm doing it.
In the end, the lesson was all about having fun as well, and judging by the participants' reactions, the fun was found in abundance. Now, apart from the majestic art of Chinese calligraphy, the Mandarin Center also plans to host a tea party and a chess tournament, so that more and more Cape Townians can immerse themselves in Chinese culture and traditions that date back ages and are steeped in history. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And in other news we are following for you today, Uganda has welcomed the decision by Rwanda to reopen its Gatuna border after close to 3 years. Rwanda's foreign ministry says the move follows a visit by Uganda's commander of land forces and presidential advisor on special duties, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, to mend ties. But to the business community doing cross-border trade, the 3-year closure brought their businesses to a standstill. Isabel Nakiria reports.
The Ugandan government says bilateral ties with Rwanda have been restored, but sympathized with the well-being of traders at the border. The closure of Rwanda's border caused a trade standoff and strained diplomatic relations between the two countries. It's estimated over 6,000 small-scale traders were affected by the border closure.
It's a lot of money, because in a week I can make, the little would be like 2 to 3 millions. Yeah, because I export like 8 to 10 trucks.
Uganda's export earnings from Rwanda fell by 81% last year, according to Bank of Uganda figures, the lowest Uganda had earned from one of its major trade partners since 2006. With normalcy now returning at the border, it's expected that trade between Uganda and Rwanda will slowly pick up, and traders will eventually rebuild their livelihoods. But trade analysts say the losses by the business community need to be offset.
When you are having an MOU, without looking at how you're going to compensate the people that lost from their business and their livelihoods, then you're not really actually addressing anything.
Both countries say they are committed to ongoing efforts to resolve pending issues. Several attempts to resolve the crisis did not yield much. Presidents Kagame and Museveni have in the past 3 years been meeting to patch up their differences.
I may have my own understanding, but somebody has got a different view. That's why sharing becomes very important, and that's why we are grateful. I myself am grateful that President Lorenzo came in, President Tshisekedi came in. I had already been in touch with President Kagame through our own channels.
So far, Uganda has fired the chief of military intelligence days after a meeting between President Kagame and Uganda's commander of land forces and presidential advisor on special duties, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba. Rwanda had been accusing the CMI chief of arbitrary arrests and torture of Rwandese nationals living in Uganda, while Uganda accused Rwanda of spying. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Zimbabwe's aquaculture sector has yet to take off despite the country's abundant water resources. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization is set to start a project to improve food security by expanding tilapia farming, which will in turn contribute to poverty reduction and stimulate economic growth.
Zimbabwe has over 12,000 dams, making it ideal for fish farming. The aquaculture sector produces 10,500 tons of fish a year, at a value of $31 million. Nearly 80% of the fish farmed are the Nile tilapia.
The fish stay on the water for anything from 6 to 9 months, and then they grow up to 3 to 600 grams or 800 grams, depending on what a customer might require.
But many smallholder fish farmers are looking to tap in to this lucrative industry. But it's not an easy space to navigate.
With my family, we work together almost every day. It's like we're a puzzle. When I entered into the tilapia farming, I thought it was an easy thing to do, especially when we started on the construction of ponds. I thought we can just use our picks, our hoes to make the ponds. But later on I discovered that there was need for bigger machineries like excavators.
Many smallholder fish farmers lack proper knowledge, training, money and equipment.
But the biggest issue for any tilapia farmer is feed. So feed constitutes 60% of your cost of production.
The UN Food and Agriculture Organization hopes to unlock the potential of smallholder fish farmers. This year, it will implement a global initiative called Fish for ACP.
Fish is very important for the economies of the countries of this region as a source of food, as a source of income, as a source of livelihood, as a source of job. But the fisheries and aquaculture sectors have not been able to reach the full potential that they could in these regions. And not only have not been able to reach the growth that they could have, but as well the benefits that they generate do not always reach those communities that need the most.
The goal is to make fisheries and aquaculture value chains in Africa, the Caribbean and the Pacific more sustainable. The initiative hopes to increase consumption of tilapia in Zimbabwe by decreasing production costs, so it's not a puzzle for small farmers. Nokuthula Shabalala, CGTN.
Let's now take a quick look at your sports news. Here's what's coming up. Rafael Nadal digs deep to make history with the Australian Open title win against Daniel